Hello everyone and welcome back to another video with On Point Politics, and today we're going to be looking at my brand new election model. Hit the like button and subscribe if you want more content just like this. And so, based out of all the states in the model, this is the official forecast on my website now. Donald Trump is getting almost about 74 million votes. He basically loses about a couple million, or not even a couple million. He actually loses barely anything. If we actually go to the 2020 Wikipedia page, we'll see he actually literally loses about like 300,000 voters from the previous election in this forecast. Harris, on the other hand, is only getting about 70 million votes in this forecast, which is 11 million votes worse than the incumbent president Joe Biden. And funny enough, the model percentage in terms of how much the candidates are getting actually perfectly match up the raw average in my national average, which is pretty interesting. And we can see Donald Trump is getting 316 electoral college votes to Harris's 222 electoral college votes in the forecast. I did try to change the background color to just like a plain white, and for some reason it literally will not let me do it. I don't know why. It's something with Wix. I will obviously get that fixed, and we will be improving the UI as time goes on, so it'll look a lot fancier. I just wanted to get this model out as soon as possible just because we only have 70 days left for the election. But Donald Trump right now is winning all of these states, the swing states. I mean, he's up in Nevada by a little bit over 5, Arizona he's up by 6, Georgia, he's up by a little bit over 5. North Carolina, I believe he's up by about 8 or 9 points. Wisconsin, he's up by 5.5 or so. In Michigan, I think he's up by like around 2.4%. And in Pennsylvania, he's actually up by 4.3%. In Florida, he's up by roughly 12 or 13 points. Texas, he's up by a little bit more than that, actually. He's actually leading slightly more in Texas than he is Florida. And, you know, some of these deep blue states like Washington, Oregon. I mean, Washington's almost 15 points. New York is about a 14-point victory for Kamala Harris. So, really, overall, Donald Trump is the favorite right now in the model, and we may include something where the model does actually do simulations, so we'll have more of a, odds of the candidate winning a particular state instead of just the exact margins. So we will be playing around with that. But looking at the state of New Hampshire, this is the one that is very interesting because I have Donald Trump improving with whites by just enough to narrowly flip the state. And I basically went ahead and plugged in all the demographic margins, comparing the exit polls from previous elections and kind of seeing where that would end up. And of course, we are going to test this model to the 2020 election to see how accurate it would have been for that presidential election. But essentially what we do is we basically have our each demographics for each state, and we essentially go ahead and calculate the margins. These will be changed over time as more people look at these. These margins will be updated as time goes on. The nonpartisan vote, which is very interesting. I don't know why it's a national popular vote, but if we see here, we can clearly see we analyze each state's voting trends by comparing them to the national average, tracing back from 2000 to 2020. For example, Georgia voted 4.2 percentage points to the right of the nation. We adjust each state's relative nation voting based on our popular vote average. So essentially, from 2000 to 2020, a state like Georgia may have been trending like 1 to 2 points to the left, right? Like, let's say that's the case. And let's say that the popular vote is plus 2.64, which happens to be the national average that we have. And when you apply that to that part of the model, it ends up giving you roughly a Trump plus 4 to 5 point win in the state of Georgia. That is the second part of the model. And then we have my polling averages, which I have done for all of these states except a majority of them, actually. Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Minnesota, the Rust Belt, Virginia, North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Texas, New Hampshire, and Maine are all of these states I've done averages for. The other ones are essentially my predicted margins for all of the states. And we will be seeing here, we are testing various weights to these 3 margins, and we'll refine based on 2020 data. So in another video, I will come back and say, okay, We tested the model to 2020, and we have weighted all of the margins accordingly to get an accurate result according to that election. So that's going to be something pretty interesting to look at there. And we clearly see our 2020 margins will be shared selectively and only after we've closely aligned them with the 2020 results. And we will be finalizing and announcing these by mid-September. So once mid-September comes around, the model may change slightly depending on how drastic the 2020 corrections are. But this is essentially what we have right now. And looking at this, I basically have a little thing at the bottom saying why 538's election model will be wrong. On point politics margins are starkly different and more current prediction compared to 538. Again, I'm going to explain this now. The reason why they're going to be wrong and not us is because of the fact that if you actually go to their site, it's actually pretty fascinating how they're predicting the election. They're essentially using their current polling averages and predicting what those averages are going to be on election day, which is kind of strange. Why wouldn't you use your current data that you have? My election model is not a predictive model into the future. It is merely a system that is supposed to accurately predict what the election would be today. And what's actually quite funny is that Alaska is about a 13-point win for Donald Trump. So that state's definitely going to be trending to the left this cycle because Donald Trump's winning the popular vote by about 2.5, and it only shifts 3 points to the right. So Alaska actually trends to the left the most out of a lot of these states, which is pretty fascinating. Clicking on, a state like Alaska, that'll be likely Arizona. Nevada would be just above 5 points. Same thing for Georgia, North Carolina. That one's more in the 8-point range. Wisconsin's a little bit above 5. Michigan, Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is close to 5 points. New Mexico, that's going to be a lean in this forecast, including a Minnesota, as well as Virginia, New Hampshire, including Maine. And Maine, like a lot of these are not even that off. I mean, New Mexico, I think, is about a 3-point win for Harris. Minnesota's, I think, is like about 3 points as well. But Virginia is only like a 1-point victory for Harris in the model. It's not that great at all, actually. It is really not looking that good. Maine's second is right above 15. Maine's first is like about 12 or 13 points for Harris. New Hampshire, I think, is like 1.5. Oh, actually, no, that is a tilt Republican state. I don't know why I got confused. But yes, it is tilt in our forecast as of right now. I don't know why Massachusetts is showing up as lean. We will get that fixed. Even here, you can clearly see that the margin is safe. I don't know why it's showing up as lean on the side there. But essentially, this is the forecast. And Nebraska's second does actually go Democrat by about a point. So that is pretty interesting. It does show that there is a potential possibility that that district may be out of Donald Trump's reach right now in this current environment. So based on everything that we looked at, the best case scenario for Donald Trump may possibly be 332 electoral votes because New Mexico and Minnesota are fairly similar to each other in terms of the margin right now, but it's become very apparent that Kamala Harris is gonna probably have to win the national popular vote by a decent amount to win the electoral college, because looking at this model, right, the Rust Belt is where she would have to win the election because states like Georgia and Arizona and Nevada are larger victories than Wisconsin. And so right now, looking at the national popular vote, it's about a 2.6 percentage point win for Donald Trump. And so you would have to shift that national popular vote all the way to plus 3.5 for Harris for her to barely even win the Rust Belt. Actually, Georgia may be slightly closer than Wisconsin. I may have to reaffirm that. So maybe it is actually totally possible that she does win through a Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia path. That may actually be her most likely scenario, believe it or not. And out of all of the swing states, excluding North Carolina, Trump's best swing state, believe it or not, is actually Arizona, which I know seems a little strange, but that is what my polling data average suggests, and that is what the modeling is suggesting. And even looking at the demographics, there are a lot of Hispanic voters that have been moving to the right, and the white vote in Arizona is also moving to the right in our forecast by a pretty extensive amount, to the point where it may actually be more likely that Trump does still win Arizona by a little bit more than he is winning Nevada. I mean, Nevada could even be lean. I mean, it kind of depends on how everything shakes out, but that's what we're looking at right now. And that New Hampshire, I mean, it looks like it's gonna flip. It looks like it is flipping right now. It's definitely a possibility 100% that it could potentially be flipping in the forecast. Funny enough, with Nebraska second, we actually go back to the original map. So this would have been 2016 plus New Hampshire. But right now, Nevada has been trending to the right by a pretty decent amount, to the point where this is probably going to end up being the margin in the state. And this is what the model shows right now. Donald Trump is up 316 electoral votes to Kamala Harris's 222. I mean, Joe Biden won the previous election by 105, basically 300 electoral votes, 303 to 235 when looking with the new census map. He technically won with 306 to 232 before the census change. But looking at the Rust Belt, I mean, those were really close margins. And as we look through the model, we're going to be able to update the model because we'll be testing 2020 with this model and seeing how close we can get. And based on how close we can get, we're going to try weighting certain parts of the model to get a pretty accurate 2020 result without compromising changes in demographics. And that's what's going to be really important, because demographics can really make a big difference in the election. It's very possible when we do our 2020 margins that maybe we are pretty close because of the way that the model was built, because clearly, it's not necessarily all based on the national popular vote shift in each state. It's really not all based on that. And possibly giving more weight to demographic margins and my polling averages may produce a more accurate result in 2020. It's definitely possible. Now, when we weigh for those demographics and we weigh for, Wisconsin, when we weigh for the polling averages, we are going to basically plug in the 2020 numbers, because we want to try to see how accurate the model could get if you were to basically predict everything correctly. Because yes, there is some sort of human intervention in the model, because we have to be able to predict certain demographic margins. We do have to be able to predict certain trends in certain states. I mean, not necessarily trends, because the 2000 to 2020 spread is kind of doing that for us, but we do have to be able to predict the demographic margins, and our polling averages need to be close to reality. So basically, when we go ahead and plug in everything, I mean, we're gonna see how well it lines up and what parts of the model could use more weighting. I mean, it's definitely possible that the demographic part of the model may be the heaviest weight going into the future. And if that's the case, we're really going to have to try to get this as right as humanly possible. But right now, based on everything that we're looking at, Donald Trump is winning the Electoral College very easily, unlike what The Economist will tell you, unlike what 538 says, unlike what Nate Silver says. Right now, Donald Trump in our model is winning the Electoral College. And once we have those simulations, once we get that simulation model, we'll be able to provide the odds for how likely Donald Trump is to win the election. But if you guys want to look at more betting odds, which are less biased than Polymarket, because Polymarket is the more popular one and tends to have a lot of people that influence the results way too much in terms of poll watching, we do have another website called Bet Online, where you could see a more unbiased odds. And right now, for example, if we go to the state of Nevada, the odds are about tied there. If we go to Minnesota, I mean, Harris is really the favorite. In Michigan, Harris is the slight favorite to win that one. If we go to a state that's a battleground like Georgia, the Democrats are actually the favorite online here. If we go to a state like Arizona, the odds are roughly tied, with Republicans actually slightly ahead there. And if we look at Wisconsin, the Democrats are the slight favorite to win as well. Looking at some of these deep red states, Texas, I mean, Republicans are really favored. We can see a state like Ohio, Republicans are very favored there. New Mexico, Harris is very favored. Same thing for New Jersey. Looking at New Hampshire, Donald Trump would be the, basically the underdog in that race. And we'll see where I'm kind of at, in terms of these margins. But we even have other things like the electoral college. How much of the margin is it going to be decided by? We have referendums, which is really interesting. We have presidential debates, so we can actually bet on the September 10th debate. So overall, this is a pretty good site to look at multiple betting odds in terms of where everything is right now. And I may be using these more often. So I will put a link in the description down below so you guys could sign up in order to go ahead and look at these and possibly even bet yourself on the presidential election. And so make sure to hit the like button and to subscribe if you want more content just like this. And I will see you guys in the next video.